Hi, welcome back to Grains in Small Places. I'm Kara, and if this is your first time here, welcome. Today I'm going to be showing you how I make a cinnamon roll, but not just any cinnamon roll. This one is going to be a cinnamon roll with dates inside. So this week we visited a date farm near Palm Springs, California, so we had to go ahead and get some of those so we could taste the local goods. So follow along as I show you how I make these date cinnamon rolls made with fresh milled wheat. So to get started with the stone grain mill, I'm going to mill 2 1/4 cup of hard white wheat berries, and you can use different kinds of grain here, but the hard white wheat seems to work really well for the cinnamon rolls. And you can also measure them out to be 465 grams, and that should give you about 3 3/4 cup of the flour. And my dad got me this pot for Christmas this year, so I'm loving that. And I'm going to use my induction burner here, and I'm going to go ahead and get some of the liquid ingredients started. So I'm going to use about 1/2 cup of milk and 3/4 cup of water. Just going to cook that up and heat it to like medium high, because we don't want to use cold milk in a recipe that inhibits gluten formation. So we want the gluten so that we can have a nice fluffy delicious cinnamon roll. So to that I'm going to add about 4 tablespoons of butter, and I'm just going to cook that to scald the milk just before it starts to boil, and so all the butter is melted as well. And to that I'm also going to add, and salt is important not just for balancing the flavors, but it also helps the yeast to let the dough to rise properly. So the salt helps keep the yeast basically in check so it doesn't overrise or become basically a soupy mess. And I'm also going to go ahead and add 1/2 cup of brown sugar, and we want that to melt all the way as well. Just give it a good stir so that nothing sticks to the bottom as it's all melting. And as it starts to steam and just before boiling point, then we're going to remove it from the heat and let it cool down, because pouring this into our mixture would kill our yeast. So we do want it to come down at least below 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my mixer. I'm using my metal bowl right now because my plastic bowl is actually being used for something else with dough rising in it. So I'm just going to go ahead, after everything has cooled down a bit, we'll pour that into the metal bowl, and we'll go ahead and add the flour that we milled a little bit earlier, and just let that mix to incorporate a little bit. And then we're going to go ahead and add 2 eggs. Now it's best that your eggs are room temperature, because cold eggs could kind of shock this mixture since it's warm, and we want warm for the yeast as well. Now don't worry, you don't have to memorize this recipe or write anything down. You can go right down in the description box. I will put a printable link so you can just print this recipe out, and that way you'll have it for future uses. And I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla. I love to make my homemade vanilla. If you'd like to learn how to make homemade vanilla yourself, I have a video for that as well. I'll put a link in the description box, and I'll also put something up here that you can go over and take a look at that video after you're done with this one. Okay, and before I put the yeast in, I like to just let everything kind of sit for like 15 minutes, just to let this fresh milled flour absorb some of the liquids. It just helps for a better loaf and the gluten to form a little bit better for me. So I'm going to cover this and let it sit for 15 minutes. And while that sits, I'm going to go ahead and prepare the filling part. That way it's ready to go. And we got these dates from a local date farm near Palm Springs, California. And it's actually called Shields Date Farm. It is one of the oldest date farms still around in the US. So we're just going to kind of cut these up and take the little pits out and then dice them really fine. And when we dice them, they kind of turn into like, it looks like gooey mush. But we're going to go ahead and mix that with a few other things. I'll show you here. Matt so graciously offered to cut these up for me. He's much better with knife skills than I am. I guess that's why I'm the baker. And for the filling, we're going to go ahead and melt about 4 tablespoons of butter. So basically the rest of the stick of butter that we were using earlier. We used about 1/2 cup of the dates that were kind of all chopped up. As you can see, it's kind of a little clump here, but it just takes a little bit of working to get it to mix through. And then we'll add about 1/4 cup of brown sugar. And we actually picked up some of this date sugar when we were at the farm as well. That is an optional ingredient. You could add a little bit extra brown sugar or white sugar if you don't have date sugar, but we really wanted to try the full authentic date sugar in these. And spoiler alert, it turned out great. And then we're going to add a tablespoon of cinnamon and about 1/4 teaspoon of cardamom. And then you're just going to stir that around till it kind of all combines a little bit. And I'm noticing that I'm probably not going to be able to spread this on my dough without destroying the integrity of the dough. So you'll see what I end up doing with it here when I go to fill it. I'll show you. Okay, and now that it's been about 15 minutes and the dough has sat, I'm going to go ahead and add about 2 1/4 teaspoons of instant yeast. I'm just going to sprinkle that in, and I'll start mixing the dough in. Just mix it all till the yeast is incorporated in, and then we can start the kneading process. And finally, my other bowl is actually ready, so I'm going to switch the dough out and put it into the plastic bowl. And the reason I like to use the plastic bowl for bread dough is because if you can see here on the metal bowl, it is textured, so it kind of wants to hold on to the dough rather than let the dough release. So it just does a much better job with the plastic bowl. Now the metal bowl I love for cookies and whipped cream and buttercream and all of those things, but for bread, the plastic bowl I find is best. So after everything's kneaded, I like to check for the window pane test, and while I check the window pane test, I want it to be stretchy. I don't want the dough to rip or tear. That's how I know it's done kneading and it's ready to rest. You can see I can stretch it pretty far without it wanting to break. This does take a while with fresh milled flour. I'm going to go ahead and spray it with some oil and cover it and let it sit for at least an hour to up to 2 hours until the dough has doubled in size. I spoke about Shields Date Farm a little bit earlier. Here's a little glimpse inside. We had to stop and get a date shake because this is the first time we've ever had one. Even though we've been in the area, for some reason we've just never tried one before. So they had all kinds of different date varieties, some that are only grown here in this farm, including the blonde dates, and a bunch of different flavors. I'll show you what we got here towards the end. And I just wanted to show they had so many goods and different date sugars and date crystals and honeys and jellies and jams and candies and oh my goodness, just so much. And Cody had to try some of the ice cream, being a little bit silly. The ice cream did not have dates in it, but Matt decided to try the date shake. And we all liked it. It honestly kind of tasted like chocolate ice cream a little bit. It has like a chocolate cinnamon type hint to it. They also sold grapefruits here because they had some grapefruits growing, and they had a beautiful little garden and with some lemon trees. And you can see the date palms, and some of them still have the ladders hanging from when they're doing the picking. And a lot of cute little statues, and this is just a little wishing well that was kind of beautiful. And we also got to see a hummingbird. I hope you can see it up there, but it was just so cool. It was just a nice sight to see the nature and the beauty that's just kind of natural in the area. And there was a little courtyard area that was grassy that I guess they do wedding venues here, and we went with a big group of friends and all the kids got to play together. And here's the grapefruits I was talking about. And here is what we came home with. Pumpkin butter, the big variety pack of different kinds of dates, and some flavored dates, and the date sugar. So we used a couple of these things in this recipe that we're making today. Okay, and now the dough has rested, so we're gonna go ahead and fill them, roll them, and shape them. I like to use olive oil on my table rather than flour. That way my cinnamon rolls don't get dried out and nothing sticks to the table and nothing sticks to my hands. It just makes, for me, a nicer process and a little bit easier cleanup. So I'm going to go ahead and take the dough out of the bowl, and then I'm going to flatten it into a long rectangle. And then I'm kind of just breaking up and sprinkling the filling that we made earlier all around on the rectangle, just leaving around all of the edges with no filling, so that way when I roll it up I won't have an issue with that. But because the filling was kind of thick because of the dates, it just worked easier to just break it into pieces. And then I just took a little bit extra brown sugar with a little bit of cinnamon mixed in and sprinkled that all over the top of the mixture. That way there was no plain parts to the inside of the cinnamon roll, because we know that we all love that ooey gooey cinnamon roll. And I honestly thought the dates gave these cinnamon rolls just like a level up flavor. If I didn't tell you there was dates in here, you probably wouldn't know it when you ate them, but obviously we knew there were dates in there. It just leveled up the flavor. I don't know, they have like almost a chocolatey cinnamon type flavor already, so it's just a subtle hint. I honestly thought they were going to be more like cinnamon raisin, but they really just kind of baked in, and it wasn't really what I expected, but I think it ended up even better than what I expected. I really appreciate all the encouragement that some of you guys have given me. If you know anything about me, you know I'm not really an extroverted person, so it's a little bit difficult for me to do these kinds of things. But I'm loving showing everybody how to use fresh milled flour, and I love answering questions. I know around a lot of campfires I've answered a lot of questions, and it's just kind of nice being able to answer the questions. And then with these pieces, I'm just kind of pushing them down into the dough. And here you'll see where I'm using the extra brown sugar, and I'm just sprinkling it over the top. That way, like I said, every little bit gets some brown sugar and cinnamon flavor. I think they still would have ended up just fine if I didn't do this step, but I wasn't sure, so I just used my instincts and decided let's go ahead and do that. I try to put out a video about once a week, and if you check out my blog at grainsandsmallplaces.net, you'll see I actually have a lot more recipes over there that don't even have videos yet, or that don't have videos at all. And check me out. I'm also on Facebook, and I have Pinterest, so sometimes you'll see recipes that aren't on my YouTube channel, and you may want to check all of those places out. If you go on Facebook and you go to Grains and Small Places and you follow that channel, every time I put a new blog post or a new recipe or a new video out, you will get notified on that Facebook page as well. Okay, and then when everything is all ready to go, then I'm going to take the long side towards me and I'm going to roll up the dough into a log, basically. And I'm going to use my 9x13 pan, and I just line it with parchment paper. And that way I can get 12 cinnamon rolls. I've tried to make these in, I think it's an 8x8, but it could be a 9x9 glass pan. And it just, everything just gets so smushed in there and they don't rise well. So I found that using a 9x13 pan works best for this recipe, for me anyways. And so that way I will just slice the dough into 12 semi-even pieces. If you know anything about me, if you've been watching for a while, I don't really measure that well, and I just try my best. Sometimes my things are rustic. I'm not really in it to make it pretty. I'm kind of more in it to make it taste good, but I do know that you eat with your eyes as well. So to get 12 pieces, I'm going to cut the log in half. I don't know why I'm calling it a log. It just seems like the easiest way to describe it. But then I'm going to cut each of the other halves in half, and then each one of those will be cut into thirds. That way I'll have 12 pieces. There are some people that will cut the ends off and throw those away, but I figure that's not necessary. I want to keep every little bit of mine because I find that the filling kind of oozes down into those as well anyway. So when I put them on the tray, I just give them a little push down also. That way they're all sort of equal in height, and I like them to touch each other once they've risen, because then they rise up better instead of out. And then I have much more beautiful cinnamon roll. My niece actually helped me figure some of these cinnamon roll tricks out because hers were turning out so beautiful, and I had to ask her a couple things, and since then our cinnamon rolls have come out much more beautiful. I'm not a morning person, so if you're like me, at this stage I like to cover these cinnamon rolls with plastic wrap, and I will put them in my refrigerator. And then the next morning, about 2 hours before we want to bake them, we will pull them out of the refrigerator. Matt is a morning person, so usually he will wake up, and then the night before I'll ask him if he'll pull the cinnamon rolls out of the refrigerator to start coming to room temperature. And that way we have fresh cinnamon rolls in the morning without any real effort. That way I don't have to wake up at 5 or 6 in the morning to let everybody have cinnamon rolls fresh in the morning. So that's actually what we did here. And as you can see, they rose beautifully in the refrigerator, but you also could certainly let these rise for 30 to 40 minutes or until they're doubled, and then cook them them right away the same day. They're going to cook for 350 degrees for 18 to 20 minutes all night long. And now they are finished. You could eat them like this just fine, but we decided we wanted a little bit of extra sugar kick today. So Matt went ahead and just whipped up some icing. He likes to just melt some butter, put some powdered sugar in it, and just a dash of milk, mix it around, and then you get some icing. And we poured this on while these were still hot, so we were able to just use the spoon to rub that all over the top of the cinnamon rolls, and it kind of made a beautiful glaze. And these were so good. This exact recipe could be made for just regular cinnamon rolls if you don't have dates as well. Just omit the dates or put raisins in the place if you like cinnamon raisin. And here they are, all glazed and iced up and ready to be eaten. And they turned out so scrumptious. These were still a little hot even. Thank you so much for baking along with me today as we checked out the local goods around the area and used up the fresh dates. I really appreciate all your kind comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out my blog at grainsandsmallplaces.net where you'll find all of my recipes, including this one and more. I'm putting out new recipes every week, so thank you for stopping by Grains and Small Places. Goodbye!